what if the deepest thoughts in your head right now, like your ambitions, your sense of morality, your love for your family, or just your desperate desire to figure out what to do with your life are nothing more than a biological illusion?
Yeah, what if everything you care about is literally just a cosmic accident of atoms bumping together in the dark?
Right, exactly. And that is the quiet, invisible assumption that the modern world just implicitly teaches you every single day.
Oh, absolutely. It's the water we swim in. I mean, most of us don't even realize it's there, right?
We don't. We just sort of absorb the idea that we're these, I don't know, highly advanced meat machines operating on a spinning rock in a meaningless void.
That's a perfect way to put it. And, we were speaking directly to you listening to this right now.
Yes, especially if you're a college student or, well, really anyone trying to navigate this modern landscape, because you are just constantly bombarded with endless information.
Right. You're pressured to pick a major, launch a career, build a personal brand. It's exhausting.
It's totally exhausting. But beneath all that noise, you're really just trying to figure out what actually has value. You're looking for a foundation.
And everywhere you turn, you're handed these completely contradictory maps for how to live your life.
Exactly. So today, we're pulling apart a source that is aimed directly at that feeling of profound disorientation.
We are jumping into a highly influential philosophical and theological white paper by Jamie Thornberry.
Yeah, it's called Love, Light, and Life: Toward an Ontology of Human Flourishing.
And the mission of our deep dive today is to really unpack Thornberry's framework, which is honestly incredibly dense.
It's very challenging.
It is. And it's fundamentally disruptive to the status quo.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with that word ontology, just so we're totally grounded from the jump.
Good call.
So ontology is the philosophical study of being. It's the study of what is actually real at the most fundamental level.
Right. And Thornberry is digging into the bedrock of reality to figure out why the default worldview of the modern age might be, well, catastrophically broken.
And more importantly, the author is exploring how an alternative framework built on these three dimensions of light, love, and life might offer a much more stable path for genuine human flourishing.
But before we dive into the deep end of the pool here, we really should set some clear parameters for our discussion.
Yes, definitely.
Because this paper touches on intensely deep cultural, theological, and scientific debates. I mean, we're going to be talking about quantum mechanics, objective morality, the purpose of the modern university system.
It's a lot. And our job today is just to impartially break down the author's arguments.
Exactly. We aren't here to take a side, left or right, religious or secular.
No, we are simply serving as your guides to the text, mapping out these ideas so you can weigh their validity for yourself.
And we really need to emphasize how challenging these ideas are right from the start.
Yeah, because Thornberry starts by declaring that our society is currently suffering from an ontological crisis.
Which is a heavy claim. It means we haven't just lost our way politically or culturally. We have quite literally lost our shared understanding of what reality even is.
Wow. And the author points the finger at the default framework of modern secular civilization, which they call philosophical materialism.
So let's define that carefully. Philosophical materialism is the belief that reality, at its absolute rock-bottom foundation, consists entirely of matter and motion.
It's just atoms, right?
Atoms, energy, physical forces, all governed by impersonal laws and arranged by blind, unguided chance over billions of years.
So in this worldview, there is no inherent purpose to the universe at all.
None. Consciousness is just a highly complex biological accident, and meaning is just something humans invent to cope with the void.
And Thornberry points out that almost nobody actually sits down and consciously chooses this philosophy.
Right. It's not like you get to campus freshman year and sign a pledge that says, I subscribe to philosophical materialism.
Yeah, no one does that. It's just the invisible oxygen of the intellectual atmosphere.
It really is.
Yeah.
It shapes how biologists talk about the selfish gene, or how sociologists view human interactions as, mere power dynamics.
Or how economists build models of humans as just rational agents trying to maximize their material utility. It's this completely unexamined baseline.
But Thornberry frames this as a serious intellectual clash. So we kind of need to put ourselves in the shoes of a modern academic materialist for a second.
Yeah, let's steelman the materialist argument. Because to understand why Thornberry thinks it's failing, we have to understand why it's so incredibly seductive.
Absolutely. So if I'm defending materialism, I'm pointing directly at the undisputed triumphs of the scientific revolution.
Right, and materialism really operates on reductionism, right?
Exactly. The idea is that to understand something complex, you just break it down into its simplest parts.
Biology reduces to chemistry, chemistry reduces to physics, physics reduces to quantum mechanics.
And we cannot deny that reductionism has been wildly successful. I mean, it is the engine of the modern world.
It really is. I mean, by viewing the human body as a complex material machine, we discovered antibiotics, we mapped the human genome.
We perform open heart surgery.
Right. And by treating the universe as a massive system of physical forces, we split the atom and put rovers on Mars.
So the materialist argument is that empirical measurement and mechanical causation are the only legitimate, verifiable forms of knowledge.
Meaning anything that can't be measured in a lab, like a soul or objective morality or transcendent meaning, is just a poetic illusion.
Exactly. And I totally get why a brilliant evolutionary biologist would hold that line.
I do too. I mean, I'm sitting here talking to a microphone that digitizes my voice, sending it across the world through a smartphone that holds more computing power than the Apollo missions.
It's a literal miracle of material science.
It is. So I'm stuck here on the author's behalf. If materialism has eradicated diseases and built the internet, why is Thornberry arguing that it's fundamentally broken?
Okay, so this raises an important question. And it comes down to what happens when materialism tries to explain the person holding the smartphone.
Oh, interesting.
Thornberry introduces what philosophers call the recursive problem of materialism.
A recursive problem, what is that?
Well, reductionism works perfectly when you are, say, measuring the chemical composition of ink on a page.
Sure.
But it completely fails to explain the meaning of the Shakespeare sonnet written with that ink.
Ah, I love that analogy. It's like having perfect data but missing the entire point.
Right. So let's take a scientist who claims human consciousness, our sense of meaning, our pursuit of truth, it's all merely neural activity in the brain. It's nothing but chemical reactions following the blind laws of physics.
Okay, which is a very common perspective you'll hear in any cognitive science department.
It is. But look at the inherent contradiction there. The very act of making that claim, the act of a scientist formulating a theory, valuing truth over falsehood, asserting meaning.
Wait, I see where this is going.
Yeah, that very act is itself an act of consciousness that materialism cannot accommodate.
Oh, I see the loop. Let me make sure I'm tracking this.
Go for it.
If my thoughts are literally just the inevitable result of, like, sodium and potassium ions pumping across a cell membrane according to blind physical laws,
Yes.
then my thought that materialism is true is also just a chemical reaction.
Exactly.
So it has no more claim to objective truth than a rock falling off a cliff or a stomach digesting a sandwich. A stomach digesting a sandwich isn't true or false, it just happens.
You've hit the nail on the head. That is exactly the point.
Wow.
If human reasoning is solely the product of non-rational, unguided physical forces, we really have no reason to trust our own reasoning.
Because it's just biology doing its thing.
Right. The theory basically undermines the very rationality required to construct the theory in the first place. Materialism essentially saws off the branch it's sitting on.
That is wild. It depends upon immaterial realities like logic and the concept of truth that its own framework says shouldn't exist.
That is a massive paradox. And Thornberry argues that if materialism struggles to explain the human mind, it completely hits a brick wall when it comes to the language of the universe itself.
You mean mathematics?
Yes, mathematics, which naturally leads us to the first dimension of Thornberry's alternative framework, light.
Okay, let's dive into light. So in this ontological framework, light represents intelligibility, right?
Correct. It is truth, it is rational order, it is the fundamental disclosure of reality.
So the central question Thornberry asks here is one that honestly usually gets completely ignored. Why is reality intelligible at all?
Exactly. Why isn't the universe just pure boiling chaos?
And the section of the paper on mathematics here is absolutely fascinating. Thornberry brings up the Mandelbrot set.
Oh yeah, such a great example.
For anyone who hasn't encountered this, it is an incredibly famous mathematical set discovered in the late 1970s.
And the equation itself is almost ridiculously simple, right?
It is. It's just z sub n plus 1 equals z sub n squared plus c. That's it. Just a tiny, brief line of math.
But when you run that equation through a computer and visualize it,
it unfolds into infinite repeating complexity. You get these massive, trippy, insect-like spirals and endless filaments.
And they repeat the exact same patterns at every single scale of magnification forever.
It's mind-blowing. And the crucial philosophical point Thornberry makes is about the origin of that infinite complexity. Where did it come from?
That is the mind-bending part. because human beings didn't invent that complexity.
No, we didn't sit down and painstakingly design those endless spirals.
All of that staggering beauty and infinite detail was latent in that simple equation long before any human being ever visualized it.
Long before computers existed, long before humans even evolved, mathematicians did not invent the Mandelbrot set. They discovered it.
They discovered it. It was already there, waiting in the fabric of reality.
And what's fascinating here is how this single realization completely challenges the core materialist assumption.
Because materialism usually assumes that math is just a human invention, right? Like a useful evolutionary tool we made up to count apples and avoid predators.
Right, but Thornberry points to the Nobel Prize-winning physicist Eugene Wigner, who wrote this seminal essay about the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics in the natural sciences.
Unreasonable effectiveness. I love that phrasing. What exactly does Wigner mean by that?
Well, Wigner was pointing out a profound mystery. If the universe is just blind material chance, just accidental collisions of meaningless matter,
Why on earth is it governed by immaterial, transcendent, and eternal mathematical truths?
exactly. Consider the Pythagorean theorem or the value of pi. You cannot physically touch the number 7.
You can't weigh an equation. They have no mass, no physical location. They are completely immaterial.
Yet, physical reality, the elliptical orbits of the planets, the half-life decay of radioactive isotopes, the structural geometry of crystals, it all obeys these immaterial laws with terrifying precision.
So the materialist is stuck in this incredibly awkward position.
They really are. They have to assert the universe is only made of physical matter, while simultaneously admitting, but this physical matter flawlessly obeys non-physical, immaterial mathematical laws that exist completely outside of space and time.
The contradiction is glaring. Thornberry argues that mathematical truths are universal and mind-independent.
Right, prime numbers do not stop being prime if human beings go extinct tomorrow.
The ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter was pi before the Earth cooled, and it will be pi long after the sun burns out.
And the author extends this beyond just numbers, taking it into the realm of logic itself. Like, think about the law of non-contradiction.
A bedrock of all rational thought.
Exactly. It states that a proposition cannot be both true and false in the same respect at the same time.
Right. A door cannot be entirely open and entirely closed at the exact same moment.
But I'm stuck here for a second, though. How does the law of logic exist if it has no mass? Because the law of non-contradiction isn't made of atoms.
It doesn't have a gravitational pull.
Exactly. It is entirely immaterial.
And yet, it strictly governs all of reality. If the law of non-contradiction wasn't an absolute objective truth, all science, all communication, all human thought would instantly collapse.
You couldn't trust any scientific conclusion because the opposite could also be simultaneously true.
Exactly. And Thornberry highlights a really vital piece of historical context here. The founders of the modern scientific method, figures like Newton, Kepler, and Galileo, they assumed reality was rational and mathematical specifically because they believed it was created by a rational, transcendent creator.
Oh, wow. So they didn't see science and theology at war at all. They saw them as deeply integrated.
To them, doing science was basically reverse engineering the mind of God. They believed the universe was intelligible because it was the product of an infinite intelligence.
And the Greek term used in classical philosophy to describe this is the logos.
Right, the logos, the eternal rational principle that gives structure and order to all of reality.
So Thornberry's argument is that modern science still unknowingly relies on this theological foundation.
It completely relies on the assumption of an intelligible universe, but it has stripped away the worldview that actually explains why the universe should be intelligible in the first place.
Okay, I have to push back on Thornberry's argument here because I can just hear an evolutionary biologist screaming at us right now.
Oh, for sure. The counter-argument seems pretty straightforward.
Right. The biologist would say, look, human consciousness evolved to recognize math and logic simply because it helped us survive.
The hominid who understood that 2 predators plus 2 predators equals 4 predators survived the savannah.
The one who didn't understand that got eaten. Exactly.
We recognize the law of non-contradiction because a cliff cannot be both safe and deadly at the same time.
Right. So math and logic are just useful evolutionary tools hardwired into our brains by natural selection. They aren't mystical, transcendent realities.
It is absolutely the most common and robust rebuttal to Thornberry's premise.
So how does the author counter that?
By diving into what modern philosophers of mind call the hard problem of consciousness.
The hard problem of consciousness.
Yeah. The evolutionary argument explains the biological utility of a behavior, but it totally fails to bridge the explanatory gap between physical brain matter and the subjective experience of truth.
Wait, walk me through that gap. Let's say I'm contemplating that 2 + 2 = 4.
Okay.
If you hook me up to an fMRI machine, you can map the exact electrical and chemical signals firing in my prefrontal cortex. Why aren't those signals the thought itself?
Because the scan only shows the mechanism, not the experience or the meaning.
Interesting.
Those neural states exist physically. They have a specific mass, a specific chemical composition of sodium and potassium, a specific electrical charge.
Okay, sure.
But the subjective awareness of the truth, the conscious recognition that 2 + 2 must equal 4, that awareness correctly represents an objective, immaterial structure. Okay. This is what philosophers call qualia.
Qualia, the subjective feeling of an experience.
Exactly.
So the electricity in my brain just is. It exists. But my conscious thought is about something. It points to a truth outside my skull.
Think of it this way. The physical neurons firing in your brain are not true or false. They are simply biological events, just like your liver secreting bile.
Gross, but accurate.
But your mathematical awareness reaches beyond your skull and grasps an objective reality. A biological machine can be programmed to output the number 4 when given 2 + 2, much like a calculator does.
But a calculator doesn't understand the truth of the equation.
Exactly. It doesn't experience the aha moment of intelligibility. Materialism, according to Thornberry, has zero explanation for this leap from blind physical chemistry to the immaterial conscious experience of objective truth.
So if our thoughts aren't just chemistry and they're actually grasping an objective rational structure in the universe, what Thornberry calls light, that forces us to look at the fabric of the universe itself.
It does, and it begs a really terrifying question.
Which is?
If the universe has an objective rational structure, does it also have an objective moral structure?
Oh, wow. Which pulls us directly into the second dimension of the author's framework, love.
And we need to define love very carefully here, because modern culture has drastically reduced the meaning of the word.
Yeah, Thornberry is clearly not talking about a fleeting romantic emotion or, biological pair bonding.
Or a warm, fuzzy feeling you get when watching a rom-com.
Right. We need to leave the Hallmark card definition completely behind. So how does ontology define love?
In this classical framework, love is the fundamental orderliness of reality aligned toward the good.
Okay, so if light reveals the rational structure of reality, what is, then love reveals what is worth seeing and doing.
Exactly. It is the intrinsic orientation of being toward goodness, toward communion, and toward proper relationship.
It suggests that the universe has a moral grain to it, just like a piece of wood has a physical grain.
That's a beautiful way to think about it. And this sets up a massive collision between moral realism and moral relativism.
And for a college student, this might be the absolute most relevant part of the paper.
Oh, without a doubt. Walk onto any university campus today, and the absolute default setting is strict moral relativism.
It's the idea that morality is entirely subjective. It's just cultural conditioning. You have your truth, I have my truth.
Who am I to judge another culture's practices?
Right. And it is incredibly popular because it feels tolerant. It feels very safe.
It does. If morality is just subjective preference, we never have to have deep, intractable conflicts about ultimate truth. We can all just live and let live.
But Thornberry ruthlessly dismantles the coherence of relativism.
Because if you follow the materialist logic to its end, if human beings are strictly biological machines driven by evolutionary pressures,
then our moral obligations are nothing more than useful fictions.
Exactly. They are herd instincts programmed by natural selection to keep the primate tribe from destroying itself.
Okay, let's play that out. If morality is just a herd instinct for survival, then saying murder is wrong is literally no different than saying eating rotting meat is bad.
Right. It's just a biological aversion that kept our ancestors alive.
Which means morality has no objective authority over you.
None. If a behavior happens to benefit your survival or your group's dominance, there is no transcendent rule saying you shouldn't do it.
But Thornberry points out that literally nobody actually lives their life as if moral relativism is true.
We might profess it in a philosophy seminar, sure. But the moment we step out of the classroom, we abandon it.
Absolutely. When we look at a profound historical atrocity, let's take human trafficking or slavery or the Holocaust, We do not say, I personally prefer that this doesn't exist.
We also do not say, my specific cultural background has arbitrarily decided this is distasteful.
No. And we definitely don't say this behavior is bad because it temporarily reduces the reproductive fitness of our species.
That sounds completely sociopathic.
It does. When we condemn profound injustice, we speak about it, we feel it in our bones, as if it violates an objective reality about human dignity.
We act as if the wrongness of slavery is as objectively real and universally true as the law of gravity, regardless of whether a particular society or era agrees with us or not.
Right. And Thornberry introduces a classical theological concept to explain this really deep-seated moral intuition. Synderesis, yes. So how does this framework explain how a human being actually accesses that moral reality? Is it just like a nagging feeling of guilt?
No, it is much deeper than psychological guilt, which we know can be culturally conditioned.
Right.
The text defines synderesis as the innate, deep-level knowledge of the natural law. It is the human soul's participation in divine wisdom.
Oh, wow. So it's the inherent capacity of human consciousness to know intuitively that some things are profoundly, objectively wrong.
Like the abuse of a child or the betrayal of trust, and that some things are objectively required of us.
It is the inner voice that recognizes moral obligation not as a cultural suggestion, but as a demand from reality itself.
To illustrate this, the author uses the concept of sacrifice, and honestly, this absolutely shatters the materialist model.
It really does. Think about a parent who stays awake night after night with a profoundly sick child, draining their bank account, ruining their own physical health, just to comfort them.
Or consider a historical example like Maximilian Kolbe.
The priest who stepped forward in the Auschwitz concentration camp.
Yes, he volunteered to be starved to death in place of a stranger who had a family.
If we look at sacrifice strictly through the lens of materialism and evolutionary biology, it is an anomaly. It's a glitch in the matrix.
Exactly. If survival and reproductive success are the ultimate biological goals of the human machine, then giving up your life or your resources for a stranger who cannot possibly repay you is biologically irrational.
It is a total failure of the survival algorithm.
But our conscience, our synderesis, doesn't view Kolbe's sacrifice as a biological glitch. We revere it.
We recognize it as the absolute pinnacle of human action. We weep when we hear about it. Why?
Thornberry argues it's because sacrifice reveals that the universe itself is structured according to self-giving love.
So when you sacrifice for another person, you aren't fighting against reality. You are aligning with its deepest grain.
You are participating in the love that holds the ontology of the universe together.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because this profound understanding of goodness forces a massive shift in how we understand evil.
It does. It challenges almost all of our pop culture conditioning.
Because, I always grew up imagining evil as a dark, positive force, like the light side and the dark side of the force in Star Wars.
Right, like they are equal and opposite powers fighting for control of the universe.
Exactly. That is a very common dualistic worldview.
But Thornberry leans heavily on classical theology here, specifically the tradition of Augustine and Aquinas, to argue that evil is not a positive force.
Wait, really?
Yeah, it is not a physical substance. Evil has no ontological reality of its own. Evil is a privation.
A privation. I want to make sure I have a good analogy for this. It's like how darkness isn't a thing you can measure.
Right, you can't turn on a flashlight that shines a beam of darkness.
Exactly. Darkness is simply the word we use to describe what happens when the light is gone.
That's a perfect analogy. Cold is another one. Cold doesn't exist. It is simply the absence of thermal energy.
So in Thornberry's framework, evil is the absence, the distortion, or the corruption of goodness.
Yes. Goodness is ontologically real. It has actual substance and structure. Evil is just a parasite on the good.
It's the rust on a car. The rust doesn't exist without the steel to eat away at.
Or the rot in a tree.
So when a human being commits an evil act, they aren't tapping into some dark, mystical energy.
No, they are taking a fundamentally good desire, like the desire for justice or love or security, and twisting it, corrupting it, or seeking it in a disordered way.
Okay, if reality has an objective rational structure, which we called light, and an objective moral structure, which is love, Thornberry suggests that these two realities converge in the experience of beauty.
And the text makes a really pointed argument here that beauty isn't just subjective. It isn't merely in the eye of the beholder.
Really? Because we are constantly told that art and beauty are purely subjective. I like classical music, you like heavy metal, neither is objectively better. How does Thornberry counter that?
The text posits that beauty is the visible, sensible convergence of truth and goodness.
Oh, interesting.
So when you stand before a breathtaking mountain range at sunset, or when you listen to a flawless performance of a Bach cello suite, or even when you witness an act of profound human forgiveness.
The awe you experience isn't just a subjective chemical wash of dopamine in your brain.
Exactly. It is your consciousness, your logos, recognizing the objective order of the universe. It is truth and goodness appearing in a form that your senses can perceive.
And the ultimate expression of this convergence, according to the author, is communion.
Right. And communion isn't just hanging out in the same physical space as other people.
It is the deep relational nature of personhood. We aren't isolated minds trapped in individual meat machines.
We actually become fully human. We actualize our potential through the act of genuinely knowing and loving others.
Which serves as a vital bridge to the third and final dimension of Thornberry's framework.
Because once you accept that reality is structured by light and love, it completely obliterates the modern playbook for how to live.
It forces us to redefine our ultimate goals in our daily actions. This is the dimension of life.
Life. And Thornberry creates a massive contrast here between the author's vision of flourishing and the default secular consumerist values that are just shoved in our faces every single day.
Let's break down that modern promise first. The consumerist machine tells us that human flourishing equals two things: the absolute satisfaction of your personal preferences and the relentless acquisition of material goods.
And the underlying logic there is pure individualism. It promises that if you can just secure the right degree, to land the prestigious job, to buy the impressive house, to afford the curated vacations.
And crucially, if you are totally free to do whatever you want without any community or tradition telling you otherwise, then you will achieve happiness.
But Thornberry points out the glaring empirical failure of this promise. I mean, look around.
Yeah, we are living in a society of unprecedented material abundance. We carry supercomputers in our pockets.
We have access to global supply chains that deliver luxuries ancient emperors couldn't even dream of. We have maximized our personal autonomy.
Yet all of this abundance is masking an absolute staggering epidemic of depression, profound anxiety, and crushing meaninglessness.
Especially among the young. It is the ultimate hedonic treadmill.
You acquire the object of your desire, you experience a fleeting spike in dopamine that lasts maybe a day, and then you just adapt to it.
The void returns, and you are forced to run faster to buy the next distraction.
So Thornberry offers a radical alternative, drawing deep from ancient Greek philosophy: eudaimonia.
Eudaimonia. I've heard that translated simply as happiness, but Thornberry stresses that happiness is way too weak of a word for what this actually means.
Yeah, it's a terrible translation for modern ears because we equate happiness with a temporary emotional state.
Right. A better understanding of eudaimonia is human flourishing, deep fulfillment, or human excellence.
Modern happiness is entirely about feeling good in the moment. Eudaimonia is about being good.
It's about the actualization of your deepest potential. It's becoming the kind of person who is fundamentally capable of wisdom, courage, and right action, regardless of external circumstances.
But how do you become that kind of person?
This is where Thornberry discusses the tragic eclipse of virtue in modern moral thinking.
The word virtue has such terrible branding today, honestly. It sounds so old-fashioned, like a Victorian schoolmarm wagging her finger at you for having fun.
It carries an enormous amount of cultural baggage. But classical virtue ethics, which is the engine of Thornberry's concept of life, doesn't view virtues as arbitrary, oppressive rules designed to ruin your pleasure.
What are they then?
Virtues are descriptions of human excellence. They are the characteristics that allow a human being to function at their highest capacity. And crucially, they are achieved through habituation.
Habituation. Walk me through the mechanics of that.
Well, you are not born brave. You do not achieve courage by simply reading a book about courage or feeling a strong emotion.
You become brave by repeatedly doing brave things.
Exactly. You force yourself to act courageously in small matters, and over time, that action literally rewires your character until courage becomes your default state.
The text highlights the four classical cardinal virtues. Prudence, which is wisdom in deliberation and decision-making.
Temperance, which is the proper ordering of your desires so they don't control you.
Courage, the ability to do the right thing despite fear or pain.
And justice, the commitment to giving each person what they are due.
So you develop these virtues the exact same way an athlete develops muscle memory, through deliberate practice, repetition, friction, and discipline.
Exactly. But this brings up a huge tension for the college student listening to this.
Oh, absolutely. Because our modern culture explicitly tells young people that the ultimate ideal is autonomy. You hear it in every pop song and every commencement speech. You do you.
Live your truth. Don't let anyone hold you down.
The message is that ultimate freedom means relying on no one and answering only to yourself. But Thornberry argues that this pursuit of total autonomy doesn't produce liberation. It produces profound alienation.
Yes.
Why is autonomy a trap?
Because, according to the framework of life, human flourishing is never a solitary endeavor. We are fundamentally relational beings.
So we are formed by communities, families, traditions, institutions that hold us to standards much higher than our own immediate fleeting preferences.
Think about it. If I am the ultimate and only authority in my life, I am never going to push myself beyond what feels comfortable in the moment.
Right. If I want to be a great runner, I need a coach to push me to run the extra mile when I want to quit.
If I want to be a great thinker, I need a professor to tell me my essay is lazy and force me to rewrite it.
So modern individualism assumes that all external authority is inherently oppressive.
But the classical understanding recognized that willingly submitting to the wisdom of a community of practice is the only way to achieve true excellence.
Autonomy basically just leaves you isolated with your own mediocrity.
That's a harsh but true way to put it. And this communal aspect extends directly into how Thornberry views the concept of work.
The author's view on work is vital because right now, work is viewed almost entirely instrumentally.
I work a job I tolerate so I can get a paycheck, so I can buy consumer goods on the weekend to distract myself from the fact that I have to go back to the job I tolerate on Monday.
It's a closed, depressing loop. It is a completely transactional, spiritually empty view of human labor.
But Thornberry says work is meant to be creative stewardship. It is the act of bringing order out of chaos.
Whether you are writing a symphony, framing a house, raising a child, or coding software, you are participating in the rational structure of reality.
You are taking the raw material of the world and elevating it to what it has the potential to become.
And when a society severs the connection between daily labor and ultimate meaning, you get the widespread burnout, the quiet quitting, and the deep cynicism we see everywhere today.
Let's pause and synthesize this, because we've covered massive philosophical ground.
We really have. So if I'm a listener trying to map out my worldview, trying to understand the two distinct paths laid out before me, what are the core differences? Let's just create a study guide and contrast materialism against the Logos framework.
Okay, let's do it. Under materialism, reality consists strictly of matter and energy. Nothing transcendent exists.
Consciousness is an evolutionary accident, a byproduct of brain chemistry.
Meaning is a human invention, a coping mechanism projected onto a blank, indifferent universe.
Morality is a useful fiction designed to ensure species survival.
The ultimate goal of your human life is to maximize personal autonomy and satisfy your material preferences.
And the result of this framework, when played out on a civilizational scale, is exactly what we see around us: fragmentation, social alienation, and nihilism.
And the alternative is the Logos framework, which Thornberry is advocating. Logos is the eternal rational principle that gives order to reality.
Under this framework, the universe is inherently intelligible and mathematical. That's the dimension of light.
Morality is an objective, discoverable reality woven into the fabric of the universe. That's love.
Consciousness isn't an accident. It actively participates in that eternal reason.
The ultimate goal of human life is not autonomy, but alignment with reality as it actually is.
And the result of this framework is eudaimonia, true flourishing, creative vitality, and genuine communion with others, which is life.
That contrast is the beating heart of the white paper.
But Thornberry is intensely practical. Understanding the Logos framework intellectually is only half the battle.
Right. The other half is figuring out how to actually live it out in a culture that is aggressively, algorithmically designed to distract you from it.
Which brings us to the author's scathing critique of the modern attention economy. Because we can have all the high-minded philosophical ideals in the world, but if we spend 9 hours a day doom scrolling, none of this matters.
This is where the philosophy meets the pavement. Thornberry argues that late modernity has literally commodified human attention.
Consider the business model of every major social media platform, every free app, every news feed.
You are not the customer. Your sustained attention is the raw material being extracted, packaged, and sold to advertisers.
It's like strip mining for human consciousness. They are fracking our dopamine receptors.
But what does the attention economy actually have to do with moral formation and virtue?
Everything. The formation toward wisdom, the cultivation of synderesis, the practice of virtue, these are inherently slow processes.
They require sustained contemplation. They require you to sit in silence, to wrestle with complex, difficult ideas without immediately resolving the tension.
But the tech economy demands the exact opposite. Its financial survival depends on rapid, endless cycling between stimuli.
It demands constant novelty, outrage, and the total elimination of all friction.
So if a video doesn't hook me in the first 1.5 seconds, I swipe up. My brain is being trained to reject anything that requires patience.
And the terrifying consequence, Thornberry warns, is that our actual biological capacity for deep attention begins to atrophy.
If your awareness is constantly fractured by a barrage of push notifications, infinite scrolls, and algorithmic outrage,
You become highly receptive to shallow emotional stimulation, but fundamentally incapable of integrating your experiences into deep moral understanding.
you literally lose the ability to pursue light and love.
I have to play the skeptic here, though. It feels a bit like Thornberry is just saying, technology is bad, get off your phone, go read a book.
Yeah, it borders on the grumpy old man yelling at a cloud trope. Is it really that simple?
The author is very careful to avoid that reductive trap. Technology itself is not inherently evil. A smartphone is just a tool.
So what's the real danger?
The real danger is the logic governing contemporary techter. The implicit assumption that whatever can be developed to capture human attention and monetize it should be developed regardless of the psychological cost.
So Thornberry is calling for a new media ecology.
Exactly.
A media ecology, meaning we have to intentionally design tools and environments that value depth over breadth and rigorous truth-seeking over cheap algorithmic stimulation.
We need tools that serve human flourishing, rather than tools that treat humans as a resource to be harvested.
But we can't wait for Silicon Valley to suddenly discover classical virtue ethics and rewrite their algorithms. We have to wake up and live our lives tomorrow morning.
So how do we operationalize this? How does a college student or a young professional actively align their daily life with light and love in the middle of the attention economy?
Thornberry outlines 4 specific, highly actionable daily habits.
Let's unpack them. The first habit is perhaps the most difficult for a modern person: reclaiming silence.
The text is uncompromising on this. We must dramatically, intentionally reduce our exposure to engineered stimulation.
Thornberry isn't saying you have to move to a monastic cabin in the woods, but it means you have to carve out periods of absolute unbroken silence in your daily routine.
No podcasts, present company accepted, of course. No Spotify in the background. No YouTube on the second monitor. No scrolling while you eat. Just silence.
Because without silence, there is no integration. Your brain never gets to process what it has consumed.
Silence is the only environment where your synderesis, the voice of conscience, can actually be heard over the noise of your anxieties and the culture's demands.
Which leads directly into the second habit: deep reading.
Deep reading is the active resistance against fractured media. We have been conditioned to consume information in bullet points, hot takes, and 280-character arguments.
This destroys our ability to follow complex logic. Thornberry argues that we must intentionally engage in the long-form transmission of wisdom.
Read old books, read difficult books that force you to slow down. Train your brain to sustain a single, nuanced argument over hundreds of pages.
It is an act of rebellion against the shrinking of your attention span.
The third habit is practicing the virtues. And the operative word here is practicing.
This goes back to habituation. You cannot just think your way into becoming a good person. You have to actively perform generous acts to habituate your character.
If you want to develop temperance, you have to practice telling yourself no to small, immediate comforts, like mindlessly checking your phone or buying something you don't need.
So that you have the willpower to say no when the moral stakes are actually high. You have to build the muscle.
And finally, the fourth habit: authentic work and community.
This is the antidote to the alienation of autonomy. It means treating your daily labor or your college studies not just as a transactional hurdle to get a credential, but as active civilization building.
It is stewardship, and it requires actively submitting yourself to the wisdom of a real community.
Join a rigorous study group, commit to a faith community, or dedicate yourself to a volunteer organization.
Put yourself in a space where you are known, where you are vulnerable, and where you are held accountable to standards that are higher than your own passing moods.
Reclaiming silence, deep reading, practicing virtue, and committing to authentic community. These are not just life hacks. They are the concrete daily applications of living out an ontology of love, light, and life.
As we synthesize everything we've explored today, the journey we've taken is profound.
We started by examining the silent, invisible oxygen of materialism, the default worldview that insists we are nothing but accidental biological machines, wandering a meaningless universe, trying to maximize our pleasure before we die.
And we engaged with Thornberry's powerful counter-argument that the deepest realities of human existence point to something entirely different.
The staggering mathematical beauty of the Mandelbrot set, the universal immaterial laws of logic, the undeniable inner voice of conscience, the awe of beauty, and the profound reality of human sacrifice.
All of these converge to reveal a universe that has an objective, rational, and moral structure.
And the promise of the Logos framework is that when you align yourself with that structure, you don't find restriction. You find life.
You find true eudaimonia. Not the cheap, exhausting, fleeting high of consumerism, but the deep, abiding fulfillment of actualizing your potential and becoming the excellent human being you were meant to be.
It is a total paradigm shift. It changes not just what you think about, but how you perceive reality itself.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Thornberry makes a beautiful point near the end of the paper.
Every single person inherits a civilization. You did not invent the language you speak, you did not build the institutions you use, and you did not generate the moral wisdom you have access to.
It was handed to you by generations who came before, and it is a sacred work to receive that inheritance, to correct what is broken or corrupt in it, and to faithfully transmit it to the next generation.
You are not meant to be a passive consumer. You are called to be a builder.
And that leads me to a final thought I want to leave you with, building on the implications of Thornberry's critique.
The author notes that many of our modern institutions, specifically the university you might be attending right this minute, no longer view their primary mission as forming people toward wisdom.
They have largely abandoned the pursuit of light and love. They have transitioned into massive sorting mechanisms that simply distribute credentials for the corporate job market.
So the question you have to confront tomorrow morning, the moment your alarm goes off, is this. Are you going to class simply to purchase a credential, to feed the consumer machine?
Are you just jumping through hoops to get the paper so you can get the paycheck so you can buy the distractions?
Or are you going to use those hours to demand a true education?
To awaken your capacities, to pursue light and love, and to begin the quiet, rebellious work of building a civilization capable of true flourishing.
The map is in your hands. The choice of which path to walk is entirely yours.
The default setting of the modern world might be murky, but the realities of light and love offer a clarity that changes everything. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.